chair of panel. If we could just do a round of introductions, please, starting this way.
Chair, I'm Daisy Morrigan, and I'll do that again. Thank you, Chair. I'm Adesua Morrigan, the Interim Director of Legal and Governance at Peterborough City Council.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dennis Jones, Councillor for Dogsthorpe here in Peterborough.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Baiju Titala. I'm a Cambridge City Councillor, and this is my first meeting. Thank you.
Simon Barkham, Peterborough City Councillor.
Brian Tyler, Peterborough City Councillor and Advisor for Adult Social Care.
John Peach, Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Christina Turner, Director for Strategic Partnerships in the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Good afternoon, everybody. Darryl Preston, Police and Crime Commissioner for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ella Hayward, Senior Partnership Policy Officer for the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Jim Haylett, I'm Chief Executive for the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Mark Goldsack, representing Cambridgeshire County Council and substituting for John Gowan.
Alan Sharp, representing East Cambs District Council.
Hello everyone, I'm Councillor Anna Bradnam, representative from Cambridgeshire County Council.
Good afternoon, I'm Helen Leeming. I'm representing South Cambridgeshire District Council.
Stephen Ferguson, representing Cambridgeshire County Council.
Jane Webb, support for the panel from Peterborough City Council. Thank you very much. Everybody, if we can move to item 1 then. Apologies for absence. Jane, do we have any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. I have apologies from Edward Lee, Councillors John Gowing and Marge Butel, and Councillor Mark Goldsack is here in attendance as substitute for Councillor John Gowing.
Thank you very much. Item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? If so, please could they raise their hand now? Thank you, sir.
I don't know whether I should disclose this or not. I am a criminal defence duty solicitor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Duly noted. No other. Thank you very much. We'll move to item 3, the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of July. A panel member is happy to agree the minutes of the last meeting.
Agreed.
Yes.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Duly noted. If it's purple, is that all right? Yeah. Thank you very much. Those have been signed. There's an accurate record. Item 4, review actions and recommendations from the previous meeting. Commissioner, is there anything that you wish to report back from the last meeting?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Although no formal actions, the team and I did take away a couple of points and said that we would come back to the panel with some updates. One of the members last time asked around Vision Zero. This is the road safety partnership and its effectiveness. Actually, statistics will show us that fatal and serious injury road traffic collisions have actually gone down in numbers since 1920. That's of little comfort to me, frankly, because frankly there are still far too many, and we should be doing everything that we can to tackle this. So there is some work going on at the moment, which I'll happily report back to this panel at some stage, looking at the partnership, because clearly this isn't just a policing issue, it is a partnership issue. And interestingly, Chair, I've just come from the Combined Authority meeting talking about the local transport plan, where I did make the comment, although I'm not a voting member, that I was pleased to see road safety was part of that plan, but it needs to be more than words. It needs to be all the responsible authorities coming together and ensuring that road safety and indeed crime prevention in our transport networks are at the top of the agenda. in relation to my office and my own work in this, road safety has always been a priority. I fund at least 2 posts, one with the Fire and Rescue Service and one of our own road safety and casualty reduction officers, along with a number of community fund awards and our community speed watch. So it's high on the agenda, but strategically partners are coming together. There's a meeting set. I think it's very shortly. A meeting has been set, but strategically needs to come together to look at what we're doing as a partnership. Is Vision Zero working? Is it not? What we can do to improve it? So hopefully I'll be able to report back in the future on that. There was a further query around the links on the website to HMIC FRS, Her Majesty's Inspectorate for Contemporary Fire and Rescue. And I think there was a query that there might have been the wrong links. Well, we've looked into this. The links are now all correct. And the follow-up to that was in relation to those inspections, where there was, for example, requiring improvement, where were the plans? Those plans are all published as part of my holding the Chief Constable to account, and indeed one of them I think you actually came and saw yourself in relation to the 101 Demand Hub call centre. So I think those are the points I said I'll bring back to this panel this time, Chair.
Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. In your verbal update, you said that something had changed since 1920. Did you mean 2020?
Sorry, it's always that financial year 1920. So
oh, I see.
2019, 2020. Yeah. This is I spend lots of times with accountants, and that's how we talk.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, we move to item 5, public questions. Jane, do we have any public questions?
Yes, we received one question from a member of public who is not in attendance to ask the question in person. The question is, does the Police and Crime Commissioner have confidence that the Professional Standards Department of Cambridgeshire Police is capable of conducting adequate and independent investigations of misconduct complaints against police officers?
Chair, in response to that question, yes, I have confidence that the Professional Standards Department are capable of conducting adequate and independent investigations of misconduct complaints. Indeed, my police and crime plan includes ethical policing as one of my 5 themes. In my plan, I outline my commitment to hold the Chief Constable to account for ensuring officers and staff carry out their roles in line with the standards of professional behaviour expected of them. I've put in place robust arrangements for doing this, and I report regularly to the panel, publishing information in relation to deliverables, performance, governance and oversight of complaints. Also, at the last panel meeting in July, I presented my annual report, which included a section on ethical policing and a separate ethics and integrity report, which detailed the arrangements I have put in place to hold the Chief Constable of Cambridgeshire Constabulary to account, and both these reports have been published.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for that very comprehensive response. We move on then, please, to item 6, the paper on the Harm to Hope drug strategy. Commissioner, would you like to introduce and present your report?
Chair, thank you. And I do have some notes, as always, helpfully put together by my team. I'm aware, and hopefully most of you are here to see a video, which we'll talk about in serious violence. But I thought it was important to share that, just so that we've all got a shared understanding of perhaps some of these really tricky and evil issues that we are trying to deal with in our society. And I think the next 3 agenda items, although they are separated out, we will find so much similarity running through each area. And when we particularly talk about the High Harms Board, we'll see, hopefully I'll be able to explain why we've chosen those certain areas and brought those together. So the Harm to Hope drug strategy. It's a fairly new strategy brought in by government, and it's one that I do fully support. There is some significant funding along with it. It was a 3-year strategy. And it's a sad fact, really, and I think all of us would know that drugs, the use of drugs, fuel much of the crime in this country. And it's interesting when we look at this strategy and where it's been developed and where it's come from. It's actually been driven by Home Office. And one of the drivers is around reducing crime, which I think we would all understand. Of course, crime is just one side effect. The others, of course, is health, exploitation, all kinds of those other areas. Of course, it has a huge cost to our society, and whether that's the cost of those committing crimes to fund their drug use, or committing offences while under the influence of drugs, or vulnerable victims exploited and drawn into the illicit drugs market, as you would have seen in the video, or the violence of the drugs trade, organised crime, and of course the human cost of those suffering from addiction, with many losing or destroying their lives through drug use or misuse. There are 3 strands to the drug strategy, and I find this quite interesting. And actually, when this has been presented to practitioners, people actually doing the job of dealing those with addictions, they really welcome these 3 strands. And the first one is dealing with addiction. Now, we'll talk about the High Harms Board, which holds to account, but I am the SRO, Senior Responsible Officer for implementation of this drug strategy here in Cambridgeshire, Peterborough. And I've volunteered for that role, and it's quite rare for a Police and Crime Commissioner to do it. It would normally be Directors of Public Health or Chief Execs, but I volunteered because I'm quite passionate in this area. And the 3 areas it looks at, as I say, is one is addiction. So what we've managed to do is get far more resource into place to deal with addiction. We are told by ministers, and I have checked this locally, that there are spaces available for services with anyone with addiction. So they can be self-reported or referred, and there are services available now in this county. The second strand is dealing with the demand of drugs, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And the third one is around enforcement, catching and dealing with the drug dealers. Panel, it's my firm belief that this is an issue that the police will never, ever arrest their way out of. So enforcement is important. It's a crime. It's a serious crime, and there's a significant exploitation, and people are losing their lives. So we should absolutely be asking our police and law enforcement agencies to pursue relentlessly those organised criminals who cause such misery. And I've dealt with the addiction of clearly, there's got to be services in place to deal with that addiction. I've visited some fantastic places up and down the county who are dealing with the fallout here in Peterborough and elsewhere. But the interesting one is demand, because actually, if we could deal with the demand, we would deal with the problem. As long as there's demand, we will have criminals filling that space. And interestingly, it's my information from the meetings and the analysis I've seen that actually demand isn't perhaps what we might think it is. It's not actually about those people that we see in the streets of Peterborough or elsewhere in our county who have drug addictions, substance misuse. Those people committing often volume crime, shoplifting, etc., to feed those habits. Actually, the most significant aspect when it comes to demand are those people who have got jobs, they earn money, and they use that money to pay for drugs. Recreational drugs. The worst term I think that could ever be used to be labelled against what is something that could actually kill people. Recreational to me means going to the park with your family and enjoying yourself. But recreational drug use is actually the most significant and impactful part of the whole drugs strategy, because actually if you could deal with that demand, then you would deal with the problem significantly. And so those strands, we have the boards and the meetings and the right people in place in relation to delivering the strategy here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. I said if I'm going to be the SRO, it's not in name only, so I do attend some of those more tactical meetings, looking at some of those figures and supporting those delivery where I can. But then there is the governance overriding that as well. I know that's a separate agenda item. What I can say is that Christina sitting next to me from my office has led this, and in fact, in some ways, with some other great people, it's been instrumental in setting this up. What I would say here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, I think we're doing pretty well. There's always room for improvement in relation to those 3 strands, and I can give more detail on them. But you know, this is one of those tricky, thorny issues. You know, dealing with that addiction and demand is difficult, and I think demand is the bit where I'd like to focus on moving forward. I don't know how many in the room might recall the Just Say No. I think it was Grange Hill I was reminded of. You know, it's these sort of messages. We've got to make drug use morally unacceptable. It's no good just telling our young people don't do it because it's bad for you. It's making it morally unacceptable, I think. So that's working with young people, getting back to that early intervention part, which I will always talk about. But I've probably said too much already. I'm happy to take any questions, and Christina has got a wealth of knowledge in the depth of the strategy.
Thank you very much. If I start this side and work round. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have quite a specific question. Sorry, I have quite a specific question about a paragraph that's in your report. It's paragraph 6.5, and it's to do with the launch, the pilot of the nasal spray naloxone. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. But it sounds like there's been a pilot where it's been rolled out across Peterborough and Cambridge and then extended into Fenland. And I wondered what the time scale was for it to be rolled out across the whole county, so into East Cambs and South Cambs as well, please. Thank you.
I'll hand over to Christine in a moment, but that's really interesting. I'm glad you raised that specific point. And it goes to show, actually, when we hold, you know, my role is holding policing to account, but yeah, this is another thing that policing have been asked to do. I think it's the right thing because it saves lives, and that is a core function of the police. But I think we've got to recognise that they're not first responders and medics, but obviously all the training has been given, and there is evidence up and down the country that this is indeed saving lives. In answer to your specific question, Christina.
Yes, sure. And I think it's important to say, first of all, that Cambridgeshire is quite ahead in this and has been kind of spearheading some of this and kind of an early adopter across the country. So Huntingdonshire is the next place where it's being rolled out to. Is very much an operational rollout with policing, working with other partners. And I'm afraid I don't have the details of if and when that's being rolled out more widely, but I can certainly follow that up for you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bradham.
Thank you very much. Some questions about the video that we've seen. Is that sorry, two questions. One was about the video that we've just seen, if you're happy to answer questions about that, and the second is about the report on the Hope to Harm. So the first thing I wanted to ask was what age group was that intended for, and are you confident that the language in that video is understandable by that age group? And the second thing was, to me, absolutely what it does is inform youngsters of young people of how this risk may be presented to them and how they might encounter it. And I absolutely recognise how important that is. But to my untutored eye, it looked a little bit like an instruction manual. And I just wanted to check with you if that's been checked out with young people to understand how they have received it. And I'm sure you have, but if you could describe that to us. And I have another question afterwards.
So that video was aimed at secondary school, so the younger secondary school.
Younger secondary.
Yeah. So that will be. I'm just trying to think now. That's yeah. Well, year 7, 8, 9. Yeah. And interestingly, I made this point early on because I recall, much of you are aware, I was in policing and I was leading child protection when we had this new phenomenon of online child abuse and grooming, and immediately people started making videos for secondary school kids, and I said we're missing the point. It's primary school, We've got to recognise that here as well. But we've got to start somewhere. So currently, we are making funding available. I'm looking for another video to be made aimed at younger people. And also, obviously, that was very Cambridge centric. But to be fair, it was Cambridge that grabbed it and took it on. It's got to be somewhere, and hopefully it'll be a little bit further around. In relation to that second question, it's a good point you make, Councillor. You know, I often think when we are presenting and talking to young people, and I go into lots of schools and do that, actually, I'll be giving people the tools to the trade. I think we underestimate our young people and we underestimate their knowledge. I think most young people are far more aware of drug supply use, knives, gangs than their parents and grown-ups are. And you know, this was put together by professionals. It was absolutely all the safeguarding leads were involved in this. In fact, I'm not allowed to show it because I'm not a safeguarding professional. So am I confident that you know that it's appropriate? I am, but I do take on board what you say. But I think the message is more important than the risk of us, you know, accidentally showing a child how to become a drug dealer.
I just come back on that. There's a principle in teaching which says, fire, look at the target, and then re-aim. And what I was asking was, have you asked young people whether they, because, you know, the music is quite compelling, it's quite exciting, it's quite, you know, hip, yeah, sorry, that's the wrong word. It's quite driving, you know, it's got a rhythm, that music, and it could take children along despite themselves, if you know what I mean, or because of themselves. And I just wondered, have young people been asked whether they think it would do the job it's intended to do? In other words, warn them and put them off rather than engage them.
I know when it was being put together, certainly all the professionals you'd expect to be involved in this. So I would have expected that to be. I don't have the answer. It wasn't myself who personally involved in putting that together, but I can go back and ask the question, and certainly because we're doing the next one, you know, I will ensure that's a question that I ask.
Okay, thank you. My second question, which is about the report itself. Thank you for indulging me on this.
Sorry, could I just interrupt you 1 second? I think we've got 2 more questions related to the video.
Oh, okay.
If maybe
yep,
we
surely.
could take those
Yep.
now and then come back. Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate that. It's probably easier. I thought the video was terrific for an urban dwelling child. It was not relatable to, you know, the ward commissioner that I look after. It wasn't relatable to that ward, I didn't think. I think our kids don't know those urban environments that were on show in there. I could see for Peterborough, Cambridge and some of our larger towns that being very appropriate, but I couldn't see that being appropriate for a Fenland village where unfortunately these gangs are still perpetrating and they're coming in on public transport and they're getting out on major roads, etc., etc. So I think that's just feedback, and do with feedback what you will. But I think if you are coming at a lower level of age, you might want to think about a less urban environment for some of it to get that message over to kids in rural environments.
So, Councillor, I'll take that on board, and I said it is very Cambridge centric in its outlook, I suppose, and I know that you know the youth of Soham better than most, and I know all the great work that you're doing there. What one challenge I might make, and I'm sure the Constabulary and others will support me, is that we know that county lines exist in our cities, towns and our villages. So this is about prevention. So it may be that they're not aware of this, but what we're trying to do is make people aware so that when these people, the dealers and exploiters come after them, that they recognise some of this, because we know that this isn't just about Cambridge and Peterborough in our county.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you. I also thought the video was excellent. I thought the tone was appropriate, but then I grew up in the 1970s when we were always exposed to children with kites getting electrocuted on TV every week as well, and grain chilled. So those things were kind of normal for me. Maybe people have got different sensibilities these days. I think that, I mean, I hear what you're saying about presenting it to secondary school children in in a controlled environment. But I think the content was really informative for everybody, and I think parents would like to be understand because it increased my understanding of what goes on with county lines greatly. So I think that content would be fabulous, packaged up into a series of YouTube Short, Instagram Reels, TikTok videos describing what's going on, because I thought it was really compelling content that perhaps might be wasted if only the young people see it and their parents aren't seeing it as well. So I think there's lots of potential to reuse that content in other ways.
Thank you very much.
Chair, if I may just come back on that. I mean, I agree. You know, it's how actually educating the parents is as important as our young people. And it's not lost on me when we talk about county lines. I've always had a bit of an issue with it calling it county lines. It's exploitation, drug dealing, and crime. But most people don't understand, and they don't understand that model. And actually, some people think it's a new phenomenon. Actually, it's not. It's just the use of technology has enabled it, and it's made it easier. Drug dealing's always been there, and it's always exploited young people.
Thank you. Councillor Bradley, if you'd like to ask your other question.
Thank you very much. Right, let me just find my question. Right. I appreciate, I advised you of this question, and I understand that the question is bordering on the lines of operational with the Chief Constable, but what it highlights is a communication issue and the ability to report. So my question is, I note that you are the senior responsible owner. Thank you for undertaking that role, overseeing the delivery of the drug strategy. And I'm concerned that the delivery of the drug strategy relies upon good partnership working, and that includes the public, who we've all know that the request that we get constantly from the police is to report. So you've got the records on which to work. Sorry, something's come across. So I wanted to ask you, how confident are you that the Demand Hub is capable of handling public reporting? And I ask that because of an incident that happened to a resident in my ward who also happens to own a property in Cambridge, and nearby there he witnessed a really awful example of drug taking with youngsters, and his actual concern was for the youngsters, and so he reported it to me because I'm his county councillor, and he also reported it. He tried to report it online, was unable to get through that night. This was in mid-August. He then, because he was so concerned, he'd taken video footage of what was going on, and he wrote a report, and he took both the video footage and the report. He put it on a video stick, a flash drive, and he took it to Cambridge Police Station the following Monday. He told them what it was about, he gave it in, and he was given a job number, an incident number, and then heard nothing more. And he's never heard, even with my intervention, he's never heard to this day whether that evidence was actually received or indeed possibly thrown away. He's never had any confirmation that it's been looked at by anybody. And so what I'm trying to establish is sometimes people do try to report and indeed in this case provide evidence, but he and I have not actually received any response back about whether that evidence was received. So I just wondered whether you are confident that the police station, the Demand Hub, is prepared to be partnership working with the public as well.
Councillor, I completely agree that partnership involves our communities, and that's why we will always encourage, and I know you do as a councillor, to report any concerns, issues or criminal activity. In relation, you messaged me earlier, I have escalated this straight to the Chief Constable. On the basis of what I've seen from your report, it would strike me as not being a great response, not being a good response at all from the police, but I won't comment because obviously I need to get the detail behind it. The general question, which is one for me, because I think that's operational, although I've done my best to answer, the one for me is, that hold into account the effectiveness and the efficiency. You will know, as panel members, and I share, that we have had concerns around that demand hub, the 101. That's why you were invited in to see what the Chief Constable is actively doing to improve. This is by no way defending Cambridgeshire Constabulary, but this is a thorny issue up and down the country based on increasing demand, ageing technology, etc., etc. So I suppose I will defer my answer to those previous ones where we've had papers to this panel on what's happening with that whole demand hub piece. I would like to see improvements. I mean, this is an individual case. I do hear of some good things as well, but we will certainly, I will raise that that has been raised already with the Chief Constable, and I trust you will get a response from the Constabulary.
Thank you very much. And I think part of the problem was that it's crazy, but the address is in one ward, the location of the road is in another ward, the person lives in my ward, and, do you see? So this is why partnership working is so important, because we need all to be working together. So thank you very much for escalating it, and I'll look forward to hearing back. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tyler, you've been extremely patient.
I can't remember the question now. I was going to ask because, you read the paper every week and the low-level offenders are getting caught week in, week out. The resources that we've got and putting into those lower level, I know this is more operational, but just for my own benefit. Why don't we target the head of the snake and get, and concentrate on those guys? Because then we'll be sending out a warning, and the demand hopefully then would start to shrink.
So, Chair, yeah, I mean, that is operational, but I'll absolutely go with an answer for that one. I mean, interestingly, you almost, I was a bit surprised there when you were saying police targeting that low level, because I do get a number of complaints from people saying actually it's the low level that police aren't being effective with in some areas and some occasions. Particularly, for example, cannabis use. It's whatever our personal views are, it's against the law. Yet it's often quite blatant and actually quite repugnant when you've got, I've been out, campaigning, even walking around, and strong smells or whatever in certain areas. But I know that there are a number of things going on in that area, and I would always encourage members of all communities to report. Sometimes you will not see the result of what you are reporting, but it forms an intelligent picture. Coming back to your question, going after the big boys and girls, the top of the chain, the top of the snake. This isn't just about policing here in Cambridgeshire. I also invest significantly in our regional crime units, so they deal with serious crime, so drug supply, trafficking. And let me be clear, actually, when we talk about those people at the top of under these sort of criminal activities, organised criminal gangs, it won't just be drugs. It will be guns. It will be people. It will be any commodity, because they're running a business. Any commodity. There is a lot of work going on. A lot of work, both regionally, locally, and of course we've got the National Crime Agency as well. And one thing that we probably changed tactically is that, quite often, particularly the people at the very top, they are quite wealthy. They have access to good lawyers, and sometimes it's very difficult to actually get the evidence. I'm sure I'll get something from your good self in a moment, but it's actually about disrupting, going after them where it hurts, taking their assets, taking their money, stopping them from being able to run businesses. And there is a lot of work going on, but we don't necessarily see that, that top end. But I mean, I've got some statistics here. Recently, Cambridgeshire Constabulary have been involved in lots of operations, taking out some very significant county lines here in this county. The challenge is then stopping someone else coming in and taking up that, and that's a constant war on drug dealers, I'm afraid.
I really have forgotten what I was going to say.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barkham.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this part of the agenda. Drugs is a tricky issue to deal with, probably not easily solved. I can't see in here a note with regards to corruption, what's been done about that, because it gets into the country and people buy staff. We know this case, particularly in prisons as well, for example. I'm not saying they're necessarily profiting from it, albeit I'm sure some are, but they might also be extortioned into doing that particular activity. Can't see a note of what's been acted on to try and deal with corruption. Also, it's a 10-year plan, so what happened, what's been done before, and why hasn't that worked? Because, as you said earlier, it's not a new problem. Thank you.
Councillor, I'll take the second one first. You know, actually, this is one of the oldest crime and tricky problems that we've ever had. You know, drugs have been around since the beginning of time. And often there is, you know, different attitudes in relation to their use in different countries and different cultures, etc. But, you know, for some time, certainly in this country, it has been against the law, and there is plenty of evidence to say it's very bad for you. You know, and that's why these are controlled drugs. I'll take you back to what I was talking about in the strategy. It's the demand bit for me. You know, actually dealing with addiction is important. Locking up drugs dealers is important, but actually the only way we will break through is by making it morally unacceptable. And I'll give an example unrelated, but hopefully it will hit home. It's around drink driving. You know, when I was young, when I first started in the police, drink driving was rife. You know, because morally, you know, it was okay to do it. It was dangerous and people might be dying, but morally we hadn't really got to the point where it was wrong. Now, my children of that young driving age, I honestly believe they wouldn't dream of having a drink and drive. Problem here though, some young people might not drink and drive, but they're taking drugs and driving because it's that bit hasn't become morally unacceptable. Taking drugs is not morally unacceptable. What can I do about it? Not a great deal really, other than, you know, bang on both nationally and locally in relation to what we are doing with that demand. How do we make it morally unacceptable? This could be, you know, getting back to those campaigns, you know, getting into schools, you know, what learning what does work and what doesn't work. You know, actually just saying it's against the law, don't take drugs, doesn't work. You know, actually making it morally acceptable, that's the challenge for us. Any ideas how we do that are gratefully received. Corruption, that comes down to the enforcement bit. I mean, I can give you individual cases around prisons only because I had knowledge in my previous role about some, you know, significant work going on in prisons. And I'll take you, obviously, when it comes to policing, there's been significant investment in policing and anti-corruption. So I do have, you know, some confidence there. But I'm afraid where we have organised criminals, we will have organised criminals trying to get people into organisations like prison, like police, where they can actually use them as an asset to make more money.
Shows that there's no reference to it in this plan. It would be good to see that we're aware of this and we're still tackling this as well. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Oh, okay. Yeah, fine. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. Just referring to put the microphone on. Referring to 5.4, breaking drug supply. Funnily enough, it's probably the opposite end from Councillor Tyler. I mean, I don't doubt that there are huge efforts and there are statistics about breaking the supply chain, etc. From a councillor perspective, the one thing I'm conscious of is that the police do take a fairly relaxed view about cannabis use, and a classic example in my ward, I was delivering some stuff to a food bank and somebody said, come and have a look at this. And there was in my ward a house, they were dealing drugs from there, and it was raided about a week or so later. Okay, so it doesn't mean to say that there wasn't an operation, but the point is there anything you can do through your office that maybe councillors can be informed, not necessarily beforehand, but certainly after, because there is this, I always tell people reporting any form of crime is like a mosaic. You're building a picture up and it allows the allocation of resource. But in this particular instance, you know, people will say to me, did anything happen about that? Or what happened? And there's the ever-present smell of cannabis wherever you go, and particularly in high-rise flats. If things are being done, and often, sadly, you just haven't got the resources to do that, I think I'm sensible enough to know that. But is there any way, either through your office or the regular meetings I have with our sector sergeant in neighbourhood policing, that we know the result or the outcomes of things, that just it's being done, not anything that's sub judice, but I think you know where I'm coming from, that we can give people that warm and cosy feeling that something is done at that lower level.
So actually, I agree with where you're coming from there. Actually, getting back to and informing and updating people on what's happening it is key to this, isn't it? And it's something I've said time and time again. A little bit of investment in that time to actually report back and say what we have and what we haven't done from a policing perspective is really valuable. And I would like to see more of that. And I think this comes back to that local policing. There has been significant investing in local policing. I'm pleased to hear you're having regular meetings with your local police sergeant, because a few years back you wouldn't be doing that because they'd been depleted. You wouldn't have local policing teams, so they're being built up. If that's not being done locally, as in with that relationship you have with your local policing team and being updated, I can certainly take it back to the constabulary, because this is a communication issue. And actually, I've banged on about this for a long time, and we managed to move the constabulary in one position in relation to how you can report things to police, because I was hearing, particularly from councillors, who you have a wealth of knowledge and intelligence on your patch. This isn't a 101 or 999 issue. This is actually, we've got something for you. How do we report this? And we managed to move the constabulary in a direction where they would take reports online and elsewhere. I think it's a relationship that needs sort of rebuilt. At local policing and local community, it's getting better. We have a chief constable who is committed to the local policing model. And I will take back, it's purely, that is obviously an operational matter, how they get back. But for me, reporting back to councils, I mean, I have my own update, but that's very general and across the county. Hope you all subscribe to that. But in relation to those local issues, I'd be expecting the local policing teams to be updating communities, and I think they're missing a trick if they don't use councillors, whatever councillor, district, parish, county, and utilise, because your network and your reach is probably greater in some ways. I'll take that back.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Tyler.
It's not the one that I was going to say anyway, but to come back to Councillor Jones's point, about 6 weeks ago, I got to the end of my tether, really trying to make contact with the police, and I was reporting stuff from gunshots and gunshot pellets landing in people's gardens. And when the residents were ringing the police or contacting the police would say, well, it's not really our domain, really. So it never got investigated. So I contacted the brand new police inspector for our sector, and fair play to the guy, he contacted me straight away and he said, let's meet up for coffee. He listened to what I say for a couple of hours. He put me on to the new local sergeants, and where the majority of these problems were coming from, we went and had a walk around there for a couple of hours, and then the sergeants came back with officers. And one of the sergeants said to me that since they've been seen around and about, there's been more complaints and there's been less crime. So, it's just, the basic facts is put some people on the street with a yellow jacket on, and the villains don't want to be as villainous as they normally are, do they? So, that's my point, really.
And people, we all feel more confident when we see, police, and we see them about. But visibility, I think, means lots of different things to different people. I mean, if you're a victim of a serious sexual offence, that's a different sort of visibility. We want well-trained detectives who know what they're doing, who will respond, and hopefully, a path to justice. That's visibility as well. So I taken on board what you say. I think the reality is, the old Village Bobby, which so many other people will refer back, and that's what we need. That I'm not always convinced that is what we need. It's about predictive, intelligence-led policing, understanding local communities, ensuring you've got all those other resources, and the Chief Constable's got the resources in place to deal with some of those other, really abhorrent crimes.
The inspector that I met up with made one really good point. He made many, but one of the points that stuck out was that he said that during COVID, there was no need for police on the street because nobody was on the street. And so police were going around their cars or they were office based. And post-COVID, nobody wanted to get out of their cars anymore. So that's one of the reasons why there's not such a high presence of police on the streets.
I mean, during those lockdowns and curfews, we saw a significant decrease in crime, actually with the exception probably of domestic abuse, where you would, professional judgment would say people stuck together for longer, and you do say that. So there is an idea for crime prevention. We don't want pandemics or anything, but we just don't let people out of their houses, and we've solved the problem. And indeed, probably there are some states, police states, where that's done, but I don't advocate that for our great country.
Not here. Thank you. Councillor Varkey, did you?
Thank you, Chair. My question is this. I have an incident in my ward and my property. Someone invaded into my property and he took my bike off from the shed. I was watching it. I videoed it, and then I ran down to him and I just got the bike back. As all these were happening, I was on 999 call, and I was smelling cannabis, and I'm sure he was using cannabis. What happened then? He just ran away. The moment I said to the 999 call handler that this guy has gone, he hurriedly hung the phone and asked me to call 101. I duly called 101. And then I have sent them the detail, the video. Surprisingly, I think maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, I have received an email saying that they are closing the file. Then of course, I challenged. You can't do this. I have given you solid evidence where you can identify him. Because the way I was persistently, emailing them, they reopened the file. And then they got him. And he was a prolific offender. So now my question is this. You were referring increase in demand. Is it actually increase in demand or lack of resources? And in this particular context, you mentioned lack of evidence. In this case, that was not the case. You had evidence. And I was prepared to give statement as well. Now, my question is this. How confident are you with the current demand? Do you have enough resources to tackle the crime? Thank you.
So there are a number of issues there. So do we have enough resources? Well, firstly, let me deal with demand. So the Chief Constable will tell me that demand has increased. There are more calls into policing, more calls for service than we've ever had. But that's the police use of the word demand. Because actually we'll see some crime types have significantly reduced. And you probably don't want to hear this, but I'm assuming you're in Cambridge. Bike crime's down 60% in Cambridge in the past couple of years, because they've done exactly what you probably would have recognised there. They've put some resource in and they've targeted prolific offenders. It's actually a handful of people responsible for most of the crime. Okay, your direct question there was around, am I reassured around police investigating crime and lines of inquiry? You may have seen the Home Secretary has made some announcements around this recently as well. The position for Cambridgeshire Constabulary is that they will investigate any crime where there are lines of inquiry. I mean, it's not for me to set that boundary of what a viable line of inquiry is, but there are no crime types that they won't investigate. Clearly, in your case, from what you have just told me, their first response to you in closing it was the wrong voice, and you were right to challenge that. And in fact, you've helped out the community of Cambridge by helping police to secure that conviction, from what it sounds from your description. Do we have enough resource? Look, we've got record numbers of police officers. We've got 1,732 as part of the national uplift. In fact, we exceeded the national uplift. They are young in service. It is going to take a long, well, not a long time, but it will take some time before we see the benefit of that. The next question I often get is, that's just replacing the officers that were lost during austerity. That is often the case in many forces, not in Cambridgeshire. They retain quite high numbers of police officers. But do I want more police officers in Cambridgeshire, or more money to go to policing? Yes, I do, because we're probably the poorest funded in the country. And I've made the case time and time again to government that we need a better grant from the Home Office, given we are an ever-increasing population. Crime has changed, so things like fraud and domestic abuse. We suffer from those awful sort of crimes here in Cambridge, just as you would in inner cities. So I will continue to make that case. There is a review ongoing at the moment. We were promised it would be in by the end of this Parliament, and as myself and other PCCs are pushing hard to make sure that happens, because I can't see that we could be losers. We can only be winners here in Cambridgeshire in any review of funding. Always want more resource. I hope that answers your question, but I'm confident that we are well or reasonably resourced here in Cambridgeshire, and I will do everything I can to give the Chief Constable more money to get more.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Just referring to 6.4 about additional grants and the complexity of helping people. Any of us with urban wards, maybe even some in rural wards, we've got people who are being supplied, they have mental health issues, and they're being supplied recreational drugs. Okay. And the thing is that as a consequence, they're breaking the law, but they're never or rarely sectioned. And I'm bringing this up because we're here now. This isn't, I mean, I'm not looking for a sort of a silver bullet here, but they are breaking the law. They're not sectioned because they're deemed to have capacity, but the police also rarely do anything about it. What's your sort of take on that, and how, because what they also do is they destroy, and I've got 3 in my ward that I can walk you to and introduce you to. They wreck their houses, they make life extremely difficult in terms of antisocial behaviour in their area. Part of that is their mental situation, and part of that, of course, is the spending whatever benefits they get on recreational drugs. So they are breaking the law, but what can or should be done about it, in your opinion?
I mean, it's interesting when you mention the mental health aspect here. I've attended a number of meetings. In fact, we had Baroness Carol.
Dame Carol Black.
Yeah, so we had Dame Carol Black, who was actually the author of this strategy, lives in Cambridge actually, and she came to visit the team who are delivering this, and that's not just a police team, that's across the agencies. And it was interesting listening to practitioners, the people actually out there on the front line doing this. And they said, it's all well and good. Yeah, it's all well and good. We can put all the services in we need, but there is a lack of mental health provision. And then I go into schools and talk about the problems in schools. It's a lack of mental health provision. And quite often it's policing that pick up that the emergency service of last resort. So you'll probably be aware of the right person, right care. We saw the Metropolitan Police make bid announcements that we're not going to go to these sort of things. Obviously in Cambridgeshire, they're working with partners rather than just say that we're not going to do it, because my view is, and I know that's the Chief Constable is in the same place, that the police should always respond if there's criminality involved and if there's a threat to life. Unfortunately, the police are called to lots of other stuff in between that, which they probably shouldn't be doing. The reality is this, I mean, I won't give any specifics. I don't know the details of the cases that you're dealing with, but I do know the frustrations, and I do know exactly the sort of problem that you're talking about, where you have really a case where there's clearly mental health issues, but mental health, either there are no services or they don't meet that criteria. of receiving that that treatment in a section, and then have the police who will often arrest them, take them into that process, but then they come back out. And for me, it's mental health provision. It's an area I'm not an expert on, but what I have recognised as being Police and Crime Commissioner, and everyone I talk to, that that's an area that we probably should be looking at more investment in. That's my opinion.
And I could just go on from that, perhaps, might be worth taking back, because there is also a level of expectation that because there is criminality, either in drug use or the abuse of the premises they live in, is that a message gets across that it is. I mean, we're not going to, build mental health capacity overnight, but operationally, the police are sort of, yes, we take them away, we lock them up for 24, 48 hours. Even when they're sectioned, they probably go away for a week, a month, and then come back. So again, it's a communication issue and managing, 99% of what we do is managing people's expectations. I'm sure you appreciate it.
Just very briefly, Chair, might come in because Christina reminded me. What you have is a problem, an issue affecting local communities. In your case, the Safer Peterborough Partnership, that's exactly the sort of issue I'd expect them to be taking on, because sitting around that table, you've got the relevant partners, you've got policing, you've got health, you've got the local authority, you've got charities as well. So, this actually might not just be a single agency solution. It's, in fact, more often than not, it's a multi-agency. So that might be a good place to start.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any further questions on this report? No? In which case then, I'd like the panel to note the report. I think we've thoroughly reviewed it. Unless there's any objections, we'll accept the report. Thank you. Okay, moving on then to agenda item number 7, the Serious Violence Duty Report. Commissioner, would you like to introduce this report, please?
Thank you, Chair. And I will be brief because I think the previous item, in fact, the next one, will be touching on practically all the same sort of issues. Serious Violence Duty, and I'll declare prior to taking on the role of Police and Crime Commissioner, I worked for the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners across Whitehall, where I was the senior policy lead on serious violence. So it might be just worth reminding panel members where this came from. So this was brought around, politically and across government as a result of an increase in serious violence, both knife and gun crime across our streets in our country, and that increase in serious violence was significantly impacting younger people, often from certain communities, and particularly in our urban areas, so in our cities, London, Birmingham, Liverpool. And of course, we recognise that much of this was gang related and drugs related. Not all, interestingly, but much was. And because of that peak, and interestingly, we saw that peak internationally. It wasn't just this country, it was actually internationally where we saw a rise in this sort of crime. But as a result of that, government put a task force together, and then they launched the serious violence strategy, as it was then. Part of that strategy was an undertaking to legislate to make a serious violence duty, whereby certain agencies, policing being one, local authority another, and they are mentioned within the report, have a statutory responsibility to share information to reduce serious violence in their area. Interestingly, as Police and Crime Commissioner, I don't have a statutory duty because I'm not an agency. And in fact, it's only the police that I can hold to account. But like with Harm to Hope, there is an expectation, and indeed from my point of view, I'm very, very keen to push this agenda and lead where I can on driving forward the reduction of serious violence in our county. The next agenda item around the High Harms Board has actually supported us in this, because this was set up before the duty came in. So we had the strategic governance in place already. I mean, some of the things that are currently working, and there is a small amount of money from government, not a significant amount of money, but there is a small amount of money. So we've got a serious violence coordinator, an individual employed by the constabulary but working for the partnership, and she's great, actually. We've done really well to get her. There's been an initial needs assessment taken, so looking at the local picture here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and it won't be lost on us that, Ely will look very different from Peterborough, from Cambridge, from St Neots. We completed a youth listening project, and I've been before this panel many times, and we've talked about surveys and low take up on particularly precept surveys, because it will tend to be generally people like us who will respond, and we're not hitting those harder to reach communities. Interestingly, our youth listening project, we got a really good response, and on that as well, I've actually got a number, 1,700, and rising, because it was focused at schools. And why that's important, listening to young people, is that I went into...
What's that number? 1,000 and what was it of?
1,700 young people.
What?
Young people that responded
okay.
to our survey, which you should probably think is twice as much across the county that respond to my precept. So I need to be getting our young, although they don't pay council tax, I need to be getting to them. But actually, it's important we do, because I'll inform the panel. Wasn't long ago, I went to Jack Hunt School here in Peterborough, and usually I go in and I talk to young people. I have young people of my own, but they still look at me and think, Police and Crime Commission, what's that about? But on this occasion, they presented to me, and they presented to me on their concerns and their issues and on what they want. And it's so very different from what my generation might be thinking. They presented to me on their concerns around knife crime, gangs, violence, the need for safe spaces. And that's not just a school in Peterborough. That will be the same. I've been to Netherall and Cambridge. I've been to Ely College. I've been to many, and actually it's the same thing that our young people tell us. So, really important, that youth listening project. We had a partnership working, hosted by my team, by my office. That was really well attended, and we were supported by Essex, who have a violence reduction unit. The reason they got that is that they got lots and lots of money from the government. That was my fault, because as a policy advisor, we try to target those most hard hit places in the country. So it was 18 areas. Cambridgeshire wasn't one of those. And in some ways, that's good news. We don't have the same sort of problems as elsewhere, but we do have it here. And of course, then other little projects like the County Lines video that we're doing, knife crime awareness, additional policing resources. So this is hotspot policing, and more funding plans being finalised. I just draw us back to, just to preempt any questions on this, is how do we define what serious violence is? Well, of course, it's many different things. This came about, really, it's about that public space, young people's gangs, knives, drugs, because it was a significant problem. I recognise that there are other forms as equally damaging: serious violence, domestic abuse, sexual violence. And I am assured and reassured that we are working very hard in those areas. So, although it's all crimes, all abhorrent crimes, all very impactful, this really for me is about that public space bit, and that's what we're concentrating on, notwithstanding that there's still a sharp focus on tackling domestic abuse and those other types of crimes. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I'm going to ask a question myself to start off with. I think there was a mention in the report about pop-up knife crime events, and I just wondered if you could give us some idea about what the uptake of those was.
Yeah, Christine, I think you've got the detail.
Yes, so the reference to the pop-up knife crime event in Peterborough, actually, I was looking over at the paper again just this morning, and actually in the last week we've had some feedback that it was due to take place, that event, the kick-off event, in July, and actually had to be postponed. I think there were some bad weather issues at that time, so it's only just taking place, I think, Ella, this week or last week. So we haven't had all of the detailed feedback yet, but we will.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. I was thinking about the knife crime awareness and the detached youth work, and I wondered if you're offering this sort of training to the leaders of organisations. My local organisation is Youth Connections Project, who work in my immediate vicinity around Milton, Histon, Impington, Cottenham, but I know they work elsewhere as well, and they that they deliver youth clubs, but if we could give them packages to discuss with children, if we're not already doing that, I think that might be very useful, because I also sit on the parish council and we get reports from them, and just very brief reports about what they've done each week. And sometimes, actually the conversations have been brought up by children or the young people, and they've had really useful discussions either with the one-to-ones, sometimes with the organisers, or with each other. But I think that might be, so I wondered if you're engaging with them.
I'll hand over to my team because the answer is yes. But also we do have I think you are aware of My Youth Fund as well, which we're going to keep that going. We ran out of money, but I found some money from one of the other books. I think it's so important that we keep supporting these local initiatives to support young people. But is it Christina or Ella you're going to?
Yeah. So one of the things we have got is the youth conference that's happening in November this year. And as part of that conference, it's kind of upskilling those in the voluntary sector about what they can kind of arm themselves with and what they can support their local communities with. So it's not kind of a specific toolkit, but they've got that opportunity to meet with other like-minded professionals from across the county and share best practice and share learning opportunities.
So would people like the Youth Connections Project be invited to that conference?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, I can give you a contact if that would be useful.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Leaping.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually just looking at the agenda and thinking that if I was going to ask a question about sexual violence, it might be more appropriate to cover that under the next topic, the High Harms Board. I don't know whether it matters.
I'm happy to take the question
Take
now.
that question here. Thank you. So I was doing a sort of bit of reading around since I've been put on this board, and I found out about there's a Home Office funded research and change programme, Operation Soteria, that's been rolled out across all 43 police forces. I wondered whether you would be able to give us an update on how Cambridgeshire is responding, sort of Cambridge's plans, how it will be rolled out here, what sort of impact you think it will have, and what your sort of initial steps are in launching that programme, please.
So I'm very much aware of Opsoteria. I've attended many of those national meetings. Although it's been rolled out nationally, much of the components were already taking place here in this county. I think if I was to sit here and talk to this, I would do it an injustice. I think we might have presented a paper before, but we have a wealth of information available in tackling violence against women and girls, and particularly that stuff around Opsoteria and what the force is doing. There are lots of strands to it. There is the tackling domestic abuse, there's in that open space. So there are lots of strands, there's lots and lots going in the constabulary, and I'd be very happy to share that information with you and panel members as to what the constabulary are doing, because I've shared that previously at other events.
So is that the sort of things that are being undertaken at the moment? Are they? I guess my question is, what is likely to change in response to the aims of Operation Soteria? Not what's been in place sort of long term, but what things that are new that this sort of change programme might bring in? What sort of issues that it's raising that Cambridgeshire would be wanting to implement and work on to go forward?
So I mean, I'd have to go to the constabulary and probably get an update, because that is cooperation. But I will say this, because I've been quite close to some of this and the Opsoteria. I don't think we'll see significant change, because I think most of the component parts of Opsoteria had already been embedded within Cambridgeshire, so they were doing most of it in any case. But I will come back to you with a definitive answer.
we could bring back.
Yeah,
Thanks
and
very
I want to
much.
be clear, a lot of the work around ops area, so it's not just about policing, it's about the wider criminal justice system,
And it's about partnership working.
about
and-
partnership working. So we know that we have some, significant issues with court backlogs, which isn't helping. Where I'm very keen, and of course in this county we've done well with our Safer Streets funding. A lot of that has gone into dealing with violence against women and girls. Just so that you're aware, and I know that the constabulary are in this space as well, there is a big emphasis on perpetrators. This isn't just about making women and girls safe, and it's certainly not about educating women and girls on how to be safe. That's absolutely not what it's about. This is about focusing on perpetrators of these sort of crimes. So working in schools with young people, these sort of crimes are not acceptable. And some of the work the constabulary has done with the local authorities, and there's a new bid going in as well. So I can't say too much about this, but we've already done lots of training of the nighttime economy and others around spotting, what predatory behaviour is. I know, and I'm confident to say this, that as a result of that training and police upskilling as well, significant sexual violence has been prevented in this county. And do you know what? Even if it's one, then I'm pleased that we've done that. But I'll give you an update on that.
That's brilliant, because I think it's also focusing on how we investigate these crimes once they've happened. It's prevention, but it's also to do with the training of police officers to how they investigate and respond to incidents when they've happened, and how that evidence is collated, because as we're all aware, it's a really difficult crime to prosecute. It's a really difficult crime to for victims to see justice. It's not always the conviction rates are really low, not just locally but nationally, and this is a national scheme to try and improve people's response rates. So it would be really helpful actually to see what sort of operational and strategic decisions are being made about how we make those investigations.
Yeah, I mean, it's operational. My chief exec say something about that, but I know that I've presented on this before, so I think it would be useful to update you. And just to inform you as well, the chief constable does have a dedicated rape investigation team, so that this county does have a dedicated, trained professional, and indeed Crown Prosecution Service have dedicated lawyers who deal with this as well, which is a good step. So that's part of the ops area, but we will get back to you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gossart.
Thank you, Chair. It's going to start off by sounding like it's an operational issue, and then I'm going to come to the point. I was recently contacted quite late on a Sunday evening by a very worried parent who said that while she was at a local park with her two children, she witnessed a youth playing around with a very sharp knife, and it was a flick knife, and he was swinging on the swing. I actually got a picture of it, but she sent me the picture. And I said, well, what did the police say when you called them? She said, well, I didn't know what to do. I haven't spoken to anybody about it. That in itself, operationally, has been followed up and dealt with. That's not my issue. My issue here is the communication, and you alluded to it, Commissioner. It's the understanding, and then what the public can and can't do about what is a crime and where it fits. What's a 101 call? What's a 999 call? And that, how it gets responded to is a completely different matter. That's operational. But I think we're missing. I think the video that we said that we were shown earlier is a good step in that particular direction. That will educate. I totally agree with Councillor Ferguson. Shown to parents, I think that can educate them as well greatly. But I'm just thinking sometimes along the way of technology and Facebook, the flippant part to this question is what the lady said to me was, well, should I put it on Facebook and see if anybody knows who it is? And I said, please don't do that. We don't know, this could be completely innocently. It might not even be a knife. It looks like a knife, but it might not even be a knife. We don't know. This is a police matter. Let them deal with it. Bring that full circle a few weeks later. We're now in the trial by public media, right, situation, and we need to avoid. So we need to stop this. I mean, you see, you know the way I work locally, and I'm sure other councillors do the same. You're constantly watching what's going on social media to see what's going. And actually just got blown out of hands. Neighbourhood disputes become much wider neighbourhood disputes because of the misuse on here. So my question really is not operationally, but how are we prepared to educate the public to stop those kind of things, the Russell Brand localisation issues happening?
So I will certainly give that support, but there is an initial view that I do have, and I'm looking to this panel actually. I mean, your job is to support and challenge, and I'll go back to the support. I know you do it as a council, and I'm sure all the others do as well. But you know, so if in doubt, it's 101. If it's an emergency, and you know that you'll go to 999, and then they might say it's not an emergency and put you through to 101. I know that's frustrating, but you know, contact the police. If it's not a police matter, they'll soon tell you. But you know, actually, I've seen a young person with a knife, and I have an image that is a matter for the police. And I would strongly urge, and I know you would, and I'm sure everyone around this table, as councillors, you would ask your communities to report, notwithstanding all those frustrations that they might say about 101 and not being updated. You know, the default is report.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, no further questions then. We will accept the report, duly noted. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 8 then, the report around the High Harms Board and the work that that board does. Commissioner, would you like to present the report for us, please?
Thank you, Chair, and I will keep this brief because this helpfully comes at the end of those other two parts, and this probably brings together the governance. But I would like to start just by saying how we got to this High Harms Board. So when I took up office just over 2.5 years ago now, there was something in place. I think it was a county-wide board, and this fulfilled some kind of statutory role in relation to the community safety partnerships. So colleagues will be aware that each district, each area has a community safety partnership. This was a very senior board that existed above them, and it had in excess of, I was informed, around 13 work streams reporting into it, with the cast of thousands attending. And I think all of us that attends these sort of strategic meetings would realise they just don't function. So there was a requirement to really look at what it is we wanted to do as a board, and then decide who were best placed to be coming along and representing those various agencies. So it got its name as a High Harms Board. That probably took longer to work through than the rest of it, actually, getting people to agree what we were going to call it. But we pulled this together, and it was to look at 4 specific areas. Now, this is a strategic county-wide board, including Peterborough. This doesn't cross over with the health and wellbeing boards, which I am aware of as well. In other words, this wasn't set up to deal with some of those issues that are dealt out with health and well-being, etc. What it does deal with is drugs and the harm to hope. What it does deal with is serious violence. It deals with serious organised crime and violence against women and girls. So it's those four high harm areas where there's actually a statutory responsibility on us to do so as well. So from a governance perspective, it's put us in a really good place because we were up and running with this already, which meant we could draw down funds from government. We cut the attendees down as well dramatically to those, you know, with decision-making authority from their representative organisations. So, for example, it's the Assistant Chief Constable from the police who sits on that, and it will be at least that level across the other organisations. But possibly thing that I'm most proud of, having worked in a multi-agency environment, having worked across Whitehall, but most specifically locally, the most difficult sector to engage in is education. And that's not because they're unwilling, it's because who do you talk to? You know, gone are the days of the Director of Children's Services who were responsible for the schools and knew what was going on. And actually, they probably weren't the right people anyway. So we've got a couple of heads, one from Peterborough and one from Cambridgeshire, and I find their input some of the most interesting and useful at this board, because when we're scratching our heads, all these very senior leaders, one of them actually just said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you the 5 or 6 most at risk of being excluded kids in my school. Let's start with them and we'll make a difference. And do you know what? I believed him as well. Absolutely. So I think we've got the right membership there. We have the terms of reference. I probably won't say much more. You've got the paper, and I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Councillor Bradham, but sorry, Barkham. My apologies.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. Couple of things. It was great to see on the previous item that there was a section for measuring success. On this one, I can't see any measures. What would the measures be? So previously, it said a reduction in admissions to hospital, for example, a reduction in offences for knife crime. Clearly, you could see something's happening. On this one, I can't see how we're measuring that success. What's the other one? Off the page now, I think. Oh yes, forgive me. There was a note saying how you're going to do something. So we're working with X agency to reduce X. It would be good to see some numbers when it says that we've reduced something and now there are less of it. Can you put a number in there? Yeah, maybe have specific, put a percentage at least, so we can see what the number is. And next time we can see that number and see if it's changed. If it's just words, that's difficult then to come back on and say, has anything been done? Thank you.
So, okay, in relation to the performance KPIs, etc., in relation to the drug strategy, there is. It's not in the paper. We can certainly look at that in future updates, but there are a number of things because we have to report back to government because we're drawing down funds, and that's something that I monitor. In relation, I suspect the number you're talking about is an interesting one. And I asked this yesterday, if we could get the figure for the panel, and the answer was no. So we believe that knife crime is down in this county due to hospital data. But I can't tell you what that data is, although it's all anonymised.
Isn't that the data that they record when people come into A&E with an injury?
So that is data, Sharp's data injuries. But I'm not going to tell you any names of anybody, but so I can't give you those percentages. But actually, it's quite significant that we are down in relation to those. So there is certainly around drugs with serious violence. The indicator there is a reduction in serious violence, and that's what the strategy would tell us as well. So that knife crime bit, I think, is the best indicator we've got. It's not police data. Police data actually tells you a completely different picture, because when knife crime goes up, recorded crime, it's normally because the police are doing something proactive in finding knives. In relation to violence and women against girls, there are statistics amongst statistics in relation to many of these. Once again, police statistics, that's not where you look. Actually, the police recorded incidents of domestic abuse. That doesn't give us a picture of whether we're reducing domestic abuse at all. In fact, it's really, really difficult to try and draw together what you actually use as your indicators when it comes to domestic abuse. And SOC, the constabulary will have lots of information on that. But I think out of all of that, the serious violence and drugs, and there is drugs, some of those the data being used is around obviously death through addiction and overdose, etc. But the most pleasing bit, if we can get to, is that reduction in A&E admissions, because that is the truest picture of serious violence across the country. But I take on board what you're saying. How do we know if we're winning or not?
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, I'd just like to go back to something you said earlier about, the role of the panel is support and challenge. So in what ways can panel members, using their skills, their experiences, their current roles, occupational backgrounds, how do we support you, your team, to embed some of these things, to implement some of these things, to, you know, improve outcomes?
I think there's a number of things there, and I think I'll take some of it away, but I thank you, Chair, for that offer. I think through the meeting, certainly as elected representatives and in the communities that you serve, the messages of reporting and you know, when the constabulary at any one time and partnerships will be putting out, you know, materials and guidance, etc. Any reach that you have, particularly with our schools, because I know that you'll all be focused on our schools as well. But there are occasions, you know, particularly if it's just a case of getting that second opinion in what we're doing. I think that would be useful to run past the panel. So almost outside of that statutory responsibility, and we don't need to be doing that in a panel meeting. But you know, I know that all of you, elected and those independent members, you know, will care deeply about this stuff, and you'll care deeply about this stuff in your communities. So, you know, what we've been talking today is some, you know, we'll often talk about budgets and things which are really important, but this stuff is really important because people are dying, people are being seriously sexually abused, and you know, this is the important stuff that we need to try and tackle. And my job is to support the constabulary and partners and bring some of that leadership together to do just that. So any support you can give, and if there are specifics, I will just come straight to you.
Thank you very much. We'd be very pleased to support that. Thank you. Any further questions at all? Councillor Barkham.
Thank you. It's very brief. It's unrelated, if you'll indulge. It's just been police cadets. Must have been visits recently to some schools from police officers, and then I suspect then some children have been showing interest in joining police cadets. I know there's a minimum age requirement, but there's also seems to be a high demand that they can't cope with because there's quite a big waiting list. Do you have any influence in that? Can you help with that regard? Because if they're going into schools and they introduce themselves and saying what we do, great, I'll get involved. And then they can't. They're stuck. Can you help? Because I believe it's run by volunteers, which is probably a limitation. Thank you.
I mean, it's good to see that, you know, young people are interested and want to become police cadets, and we've got some fantastic volunteers, both from within policing and out, who are running them. But like anything, it's about volunteers. And then about funding, and I think the first bit, the volunteers. Actually, you asked what you could do to help. There you go, volunteer and run police cadets. I'll take it away and find out the latest position on where we are, because I think it's fantastic what they do, and they get some great opportunities as well when they're doing that role. And I think, just to be clear, when we talk about police cadets, I was a police cadet many years ago, but that was really pretty military, and that's, you went into the police and you were the police. This is very different. This is about giving young people different experience. They still get a uniform and they get some great input, but you know, this can be from back in my day, you had to be, you know, suitable to be in the police and what have you. But this is for everybody, so it's all inclusive. So we'll take that away, and I'll come back to you.
It's coming from parents who are respecting the police and they want their children to be around those role models and what they can learn from their experience, as you said. So it's very important that we do put effort into allowing these kids to get involved with this. Thank you.
So I agree. The other area are the military cadets. I sit on the Covenants board and have a lot to do with those. So the Army cadets, they all do some fantastic stuff. And this doesn't mean you're going to join the Army or anything. It's just some really great activities. And without going into detail, what's really good about the police cadets, they have actually had some real success in hard to reach communities. I won't give the detail, but you know, this isn't just about good kids who want to go into the police. So they've targeted those that actually could do with this extra support, which is really good.
Thank you. Councillor Tyler.
It was actually you, Claire, that sort of brought these memories flooding back. I had a stroke about 20 years ago after I had a car crash, and I was in sort of therapy and rehab for it for a long time. But part of my sort of rehab, for many years I've been involved in the local community, you know, and play guitar and keyboards with different bands and stuff. Anyway, part of my sort of therapy was I'll run out and talk to kids all about music technology and production and the art of songwriting and stuff. And these were all hard to reach kids. So they were the worst of the worst at times. So we set some ground rules, and Lewis, who was my sort of assistant, he was about 9 foot tall, 9 foot wide, and took no grief off anybody, so it was great. But the bottom line was these kids within 6 weeks had turned from being permanently 24/7 aggressive to being musicians and wanting to teach other kids at 14, 15, 16, and they became themselves role models. Now, I don't know how much anybody knows around the room about music technology. There are hit singles now made on iPhones, you know. The backing tracks, probably Chris can testify there. You don't need big analog mixing desks or mastering sets anymore. You can do it for a couple of £100. And most kids have got the phones with access to most of these music programs. They just don't know how to work them. And I will finish by saying one of the little groups that I had, there were about 6 Portuguese lads between the age of 8 and 15. And they were dog sort of lads and they used to use the Chatteris Centre. And so we used to use this place every week. And I had a number of set rules, ground rules, no swearing, no drinking, no drugs. Anyway, so I had a number of these young Portuguese lads that came, and they were fantastic lads. Anyway, many years later, one of the mums stopped me outside here and said, "You know what? The boys had gone back to Portugal, they're top 50 single in the Portuguese charts." And I thought, well, job done, you know. But the point is, for very little money, because you know we can all record music now on our phones, but the other thing as well, we have a multicultural, multi-faith society. I think the things that bring people together, especially young lads, is sport, primarily football, and music. And if you get those different people working together musically and crossing over, I just think, you know, it does work. I mean, I know it, I've got proof.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions? No, thank you very much. In which case, we note the report. Thank you very much, Commissioner, and your team. So I think that now concludes the business part that you are required to attend. You are free to leave, should you wish to. Thank you very much for your attendance and your work this afternoon. Thank you.
Office. Not everybody.
No, just the Commissioner's office.
Very much.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move to item number 9 then, please. The Police and Crime Panel's annual report. You've all had a chance to read this within your pack. Does anybody have any questions? I would like to thank Jane for her work on this. Councillor Radnor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, excellent report. It reflects my awareness of the work we did last year. So thank you very much, Jane. Just one small point, which was the very last section, I think it's on page 40 of our pack, has contact details and then the actual contact details on the next page. So if we could just move that down so the contact details weren't orphaned. It's just a formatting. It's just a formatting issue. But otherwise, absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much, Jane.
That's right. Anybody, anything else? Yes, sir?
It'd be good to see on there any contributions that success maybe, or things we're working on, and then say what we'd like to do ongoing, what maybe the next panel or changes can then take on or progress further with, for example.
Okay.
It is a reflection on the previous year.
Yeah, it's only limited that knowledge. You could highlight, say, we're working on this, we're doing progress to that. And then
Moving forward.
They might help the new panel to then look back on that and say, okay, let's ask a question about this, because we did some work on it, this is where it got to. Just, it's just like some visual.
We can leave that one for this next, for the next one. Yeah. Okay, anything else? Thank you very much then. Panel to note the annual report and approve it for publication. Where is it publicised?
Just on the website.
Okay. Right, so item 10 then, meeting dates and agenda planning. So we have the set of meeting dates that are on the back of the agenda pack. So Jane is just drawing our attention, the November meeting, the date has changed, the day of the week has changed. So that will now be on Monday, the 27th of November. That's back here again. And you have, yes. So we've got the items for that particular agenda. The January meeting will largely focus, I think, probably on the budget, won't it, and issues around that. Wednesday, the 14th of February, to be held in case we need that additional meeting. We've never, in my experience, never needed it, but we keep it there in case we do. And then March meeting, 2004, that feels a long time away, doesn't it? Venue for that to be confirmed. We have got a planning session in the diary for October.
Yeah, that date's just changed. That would be your 6-week briefing session before the November meeting, where you get to discuss the papers with the Commissioner's office. But that's an online meeting. That's not in here.
What's the date of that?
Don't know. I resent it this week because the date had changed slightly.
Monday, the 16th or 17th of October.
I haven't got my calendar.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, because we always have a 6-week one before the meeting. There will be a January one for the budget, but you'll get the date nearer the time because of depending on when the government figures and stuff come out, they'll arrange that one.
Okay, so notice the date, you've got the dates. Thank you very much, and we'll confirm the venue. It's only that March one, that's a long way away yet. Okay, I think that concludes our business today. Thank you very much for your time and your patience. Everybody, the live streaming now can cease.